Welcome to this show. Judging by the emails I've been getting for the first 3 months of this year, many of you have been astonished. You've been dejected and afraid of the onslaught of anti-American extremism from the left in the wake of the 2020 election. This meme that's floating around on social media encapsulates the difference between President Trump's free and prosperous America and Joe Biden's socialist, frivolous, and dangerous America. Many of your emails end with the phrase, "What has happened to my country?" Being only human, I have to admit that I too have been saddened, a little alone, and with very little hope out there, just like many of you. But something happened over the weekend, a confluence of events, if you will, that changed my perspective a bit, and I hope I can do the same for you. There is hope because you are not alone. That's the truth that the folks in the biased press don't want you to know about in tonight's preamble. I was honored to MC an event in Texas. It was a gathering of something called the True Texas Project. Keynote speaker was James O'Keefe from Project Veritas. Because he was there, so too was the left-wing opinion outlets CNN and the Washington Post. Now, one of the co-founders of the True Texas Project began the evening acknowledging that CNN and the Post, as unfair servants of the left wing, were there. She proclaimed that she didn't care what they wrote about her in their hit pieces they would invariably do about her conservative group. The reason she didn't care was that she simply felt God was calling her to undertake her group's mission. Now, I was aware of this group when it started so many years ago. About just 22 people started it. On Saturday at that gathering, over 500 folks, with chapters being represented all over the state of Texas. And after a night of impassioned speeches, success stories, and a sense of community, I found something that had eluded me for the last couple of months: hope. Sunday, I attended Mass, as I normally do. Message from the pulpit was simple: go out and spread the message of hope from Jesus Christ that is contained in the Gospels. You guys have heard it before. In short, do your part to bring light to the world that Biden and his party and the press are doing their best to darken. It was then it hit me. Our political enemies, the ones we no longer have anything in common with, they have been on a jihad, not only to divide this country, but to make those of us who are pro-freedom, pro-America, and pro-rule of law think that we are the minority. They have done this in concert with corporate media, woke corporate CEOs, and a totalitarian government that is eager to mete out punishment to those who do not comply. The cancerous cancel culture has targeted Dr. Seuss, Mr. Potato Head, Little House on the Prairie, proper English, even math. The California Education Department is considering implementing a statewide math framework that promotes the concept that working to figure out the correct answer in a math problem is an example of, wait for it, you guessed it, racism and white supremacy. The press covers these stories with little or no balance, depicting anyone who would question this idea of getting the correct answer in a math problem as being racist. They depict us as right-wing crazy people who hate people of color. So we, the people and the general public, kind of shrink back and assume that we're alone. We assume the world has gone as nuts as those idiots who call math racist. But in reality, it is the aforementioned left-wing nuts who are in the minority. A recent article in Reason magazine indicated that government-run schools being turned into socialist factories by leftists in the Socialist Democrat Party have turned into the best advertisement for homeschooling. Abusive teachers' unions and floundering bureaucrats make do-it-yourself education pretty attractive, says Reason magazine. Woke, anti-American, anti-reason curriculum and non-scientific restrictions have only encouraged an ever-growing exodus from the government-run schools. In the fall, for example, NPR found enrollment declines in dozens of school districts across 20 states. You're not alone. For example, the Boston Globe reported in November that in Massachusetts, some 13,166 students from the government-run schools have transferred into private schools, compared with 7,299 transfers in the previous year. Last year, the National Home Education Research Institute showed a massive increase in homeschooling education in response to the left-wing's use of the China virus to instill irrational fear and compliance with ever-growing government control. Many left-wingers in and out of the press were all too willing to sacrifice an entire generation of kids in order to fundamentally transform America. What they didn't count on was a rebellion from parents who care more for their children than they do about advancing some left-wing attack on the U.S. Constitution. The woke cancel culture has taken over corporate America as well. Brightright reports that Wall Street firms, multinational corporations, and giant law firms, they are teaming up with the Brennan Justice Center, which is a heavily funded entity by billionaire George Soros, to pressure states against reforms designed to restore voting integrity. In the United States, our tradition, one of one citizen, one vote, is the basis of our representative republic. But CEOs are using their companies and influence to topple that righteous ideal. The goal is to make law-abiding Americans ashamed for insisting on a secure and fair vote. But Americans see through the agenda of these corporate charlatans. According to a new Morning Consult poll in mid-March, Major League Baseball's net favorability rating among Republicans was 47%, the highest of the four major U.S. sports leagues. Now, since MLB launched their economic attack on the people of Georgia in the wake of their new voting integrity law, support has plummeted to just 12%, dropping Major League Baseball below the anti-American NFL and NHL. You see? You can fight back. You see? You're not alone. That leaves us to the dishonest press and the role these folks play in psychological warfare against the majority of us here in the United States. Last week, left-wing opinion host Jake Tapper had this exchange with the former Speaker of the House, John Boehner.
One of the sentences, you say that Donald Trump pushed a, quote, bullshit lie that the election was stolen, and then you note he incited the insurrection on January 6th for nothing more than, quote, selfish reasons. What was your reaction when you saw House members you once worked with, people you probably considered friends, such as current House Republican leader Kevin McCarthy, pushing the big lie on the airwaves in that crazy Texas lawsuit, then on the floor of the House?
The big lie is an accusation being leveled by leftists in the United States. What's the lie? Jake Tapper and others on the extreme left are pushing this narrative that election 2020 was perfect. They say that those who are concerned over voter fraud and its impact on future elections, or those who raise substantive concerns over massive mail-in balloting with no verification processes being mandated, they say those well-meaning Americans are part of the big lie. They also say with a straight face that any insistence that election laws be followed during an election is part of the big lie. However, in March, a judge ruled that the Democrat Socialist Secretary of State of Michigan, Jocelyn Benson, violated that state's law when she circumvented the legislature with unilateral orders on absentee voting. That was the basis of the Texas lawsuit, a lawsuit you just heard CNN's Jake Tapper call crazy. Earlier this month, in what I believe will be a vain effort to save his job, Georgia Secretary of State Brad Raffensperger accused 3 counties in his state of violating Georgia's absentee ballot regulations during the 2020 elections and referred them for investigation. Again, this is the basis of the Texas lawsuit. So what's so crazy about Americans wanting election laws to be followed during an election? Nothing. In fact, the only people who think following the law is crazy are people like Jake Tapper and CNN and other lawless leftists who think violating the law is okay for those who wish to advance government's control over people's lives. But why does Jake Tapper get on national television and call the Texas lawsuit crazy? Now, one of two things happened here. Jake Tapper didn't know about the Michigan ruling that came down a month ago. And given the fact that CNN is no longer a news operation, rather it's the #1 hate-filled left-wing opinion hub on cable, that possibility that Jake was just clueless, entirely plausible. But what's more likely is that Jake Tapper knew about the Michigan case and chose to put out a fake news narrative anyway, a narrative designed to make law-abiding Americans believe that they are in the minority simply for wanting the rule of law followed by our own government. Now, if you take away anything from this preamble, I hope it's hope. I can say with certainty that the American left isn't doing God's work on earth. Why? Because they belittle, denigrate, and reject God consistently. They're also repulsed when we find courage, fortitude, and unity of purpose in carrying out God's mission on earth. Always remember, the #1 characteristic of collectivist thought is their belief that a tyrannical minority should rule over an enslaved majority. To accomplish this, little tyrants have to convince the right-minded majority that they're alone, that it's useless to resist, that it's you against everybody else. From Xi to Stalin, from Castro to Maduro, They accomplished this feat with the help of corrupt moneyed interests and an even more corrupt media. But as I learned over the weekend, there are more of us than there are of them. Don't let them tell you the fight is hopeless. Don't let them convince you that your devotion to the Constitution and the rule of law is, quote, crazy. Instead, tune them out and seek others who are in the majority, people who have your shared values. In my view, Jake Tapper and leftists who call getting the correct answer in a math problem racist have pushed the majority too far. This is the beginning of the pendulum swinging hard in the other direction. It's time the majority of Americans, black, brown, white, or whatever, stood up and said, this far, no further. It's now the left's turn to have some sleepless nights. It's time socialists feel the dread of being canceled. And to all of you patriots out there, remember, you're not alone.
Hey, I'm Rob Finnerty. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this video, please join the conversation in the comments below. Don't forget to subscribe, too. Hit the bell icon to be alerted to breaking news. And remember, there's a whole lot more on Newsmax TV, America's fastest growing cable news network. Newsmax TV, we're real news for real people.